Shall we just start? Well, thanks everyone for coming. I know that you're all really busy. So before I start, I just thought, well, I think everyone knows me. So I'm Ro. I've been with 15 years. So the reason why they've asked me to do these sessions because I have the Delta, which is a bit like a master's in teaching English as a second language. And I did like a practical section which specifically focused on Cambridge preparation. So I guess I've had quite a lot of experience. I'm definitely not an expert. I'm hoping that we can use these sessions, not just for me to share my ideas, but for everyone to share everyone's ideas. As Louise was just saying, she never sees anyone. I think we all suffer a bit with Clen because we don't have a common space. We don't have a staff room where we're all together sharing ideas, which is what I had at my school in the UK. So I think, yeah, hopefully we can use this as a space to sort of help each other and share some ideas. Okay. So can everybody see it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we're looking at today two parts of the reading exam. So I've kind of grouped these two together because they're very similar between the FCE and the CAE. So we're starting with the FCE reading part 5 and the CAE reading part 5. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I get the different parts mixed up in my head. So I just wanted to remind you exactly what reading part 5 is. It's the same for the two exams. So it's the one where they have a text and 6 multiple choice questions. So the answers to the questions are sequential. So the answer to question 1 is in paragraph 1 and so on. So it's testing the student's ability to read for detail, opinion, tone, purpose, main idea, implication, and attitude. There's 12 points because they're, and they recommend around 12 minutes because I think in terms of the readings, this is perhaps one of the easier ones or the ones that they can do more quickly. Okay. So just to remind you, this is what it looks like. This is taken from a CAE exam. So you've got the text and the questions. So first we're going to look at how to do it. So the approach that I'm going to give to you is what I teach in my intensive classes. What I really focus on, particularly with the CAE, is how to do the tasks as quickly as possible, because often the students struggle with the timing. I don't know if any of you have tried to do the tasks and the whole exam in the timing. Like, it is hard, even when you're a native. It's not easy. So my approach is to help them to do the task quickly, but obviously also efficiently and hopefully successfully. Yeah. So always start with a prediction. So for the prediction, you have to look at the task information, the title, and the subtitle. When I say the task information, I mean, I don't know if you can see it.
You can.
Yeah, you can. Okay, thank you. So where it tells you what the task is about, not the instructions, but the task information, because sometimes that is more useful than the title. Sometimes it gives more information. The titles are not always that helpful. Like there's one about, well, I can't remember the specific one, but yeah, sometimes there's more information in that task information bit. So get them to read that, the title and the subheading. This is really essential because this is, as a teacher would say, activating their schemata, like getting them and their head ready to think about what they're going to read about. It's going to help them to read more efficiently, and it's going to help them with new vocabulary. Okay, it's giving them a context. You've all learned a second language. You know how important that context is. Like, you go to a table of people who are talking without a context, you can feel a bit lost. Context is everything for the reading and the listening. Okay, next thing to do with reading part 5 is skim it. This is something that I actually used to skip. I didn't think it was that important, but I really now think it is essential. But I think with the reading part 5, it can be a fast skim. It's just to give them an idea of what the text is about, just so they have an overall feel for the theme of the text. So once they've skim read it, then this is kind of when my technique comes into play. So what I would do after this, I get my students to read the first question stem, but not the options. Okay, so they read the stem, but not the options. What I like to do in the first class is to take a pack of Post-it notes, and I give everybody a Post-it note and make them stick it on their book, and like, don't look at the options. So take Post-it notes with you, it's quite handy. So the reason why I do this is because, well, there's 2 reasons, so I've put them here. If they read the options and the question, they've got 5 different things in their head when they're reading the paragraph. That's going to make it more difficult. But also, let's be honest, 3 of those options are really there just to confuse the students. And what I find is if you read them before, like, your brain starts trying to force these connections. And what you want to do is go in with a really open mind. So read the stem, then read the paragraph relating to that stem, and then think about how you would answer the question, then go back and look at the multiple choice options. Something really important, especially at the higher levels, is that sometimes, as I put there, you get to the right answer by eliminating the wrong ones. I don't think we should underestimate that. I use that technique all the time, because sometimes it doesn't feel to me like the correct answer is obvious, but I know which ones are incorrect. Okay, so great approach is to start by eliminating the ones that they know are incorrect. And then they would continue with this process. So read the question stem for paragraph 2, read paragraph 2, then look at the options. Read the question stem for paragraph 3, read the paragraph, then look at the options, and so on. So this is a really fast, really efficient way of doing the task, but we have to bear in mind that there's some common traps. I found this like list of common traps online, and I think it's a really good list. I'm going to send you all of this so that you can read it more slowly in your own time. So as you know, who is always a big thing with Cambridge, with the listenings and with the readings, like who said it? Why is it important? So be careful of that. The most, they love this, like the most significant, the main. So there'll be like various different reasons for something, and the student has to identify which is the most. They love that one. So the options would be all the different things they say, and they have to identify the most. Suspiciously obvious connectors. If it seems too easy, it probably is easy and wrong. And the same with word spotting. If they see words in the text and words in the options, again, probably it's just too easy. Cambridge don't like to make it easy. And half sentences. So they quite like to do these incomplete sentences, but I'm going to look at a technique to help them with this in just a sec. So things that you can do in class to help your students, okay? Obviously, I always start by giving them the technique for how to do the exam. In the intensive courses, we don't have loads of time, but in the year-long courses, you have loads more time. So there's different things that you can do to practice these different skills. So in terms of prediction, you can kind of make it a bit more interesting, make it a chat. So you give the students the task information, title and subtitle, then put them in pairs and get them to talk about it. The idea is that it's just getting them ready and getting them engaged in the topic. So just showing them the importance and the power of that prediction task. Another thing you can do is help them with those skim reading skills. So skim reading in a second language can be tricky. It can be tricky in your first language too. So what we want to do is like help students to build up this skill. So you can start with a text. They suggested 300 words and give them 3 minutes. So when the 3 minutes is up, they have to write a sentence that they think kind of summarizes what they read. They could then compare this with a partner. Then you're going to move on to a 300-word text, but you're going to give them 2 minutes and do the same thing. Let them compare with a partner what they've taken away from that text. And finally, see if they can read a 300-word text in just a minute. So it's just kind of slowly helping them to build up the skill of skim reading, but really fast skim reading. I think it's difficult in another language because you kind of get caught on new vocabulary, and they need to learn to let that go, because the exam is written and with the idea of having language that is above their level. They're not going to understand everything, and they have to learn to let it go. Like, use their initiative, use their understanding, use the context, but don't stress about it. Okay. Another activity that I found that you could do in your class that I think sounds really fun is, so you start as normal, get the students to predict and skim read the text. And then what you're going to do is give the students the 6 questions, but you don't give them the options. So what you're going to do is get them to turn the questions into open-ended questions as opposed to statements. So if we go back to that task, where is it? Here. And if, because it's the one I can see, 33 says the writer suggests that the priority when conducting historical research on colour is to blah. So they would change it to, what does the writer suggest is the priority when conducting historical research on colour? So they're changing those kind of statements into questions. The idea of this is that it's going to make it easier for them to find the answers. Sometimes when they're looking at a statement, it can be more difficult. So hopefully with questions, it will help them find it. So they turn those 6 statements into questions. I've gone too far. Oh no, oh God. Yes, no, yes. And then give them the text. And they would go through and highlight the answers to the questions, and then you'd end by giving them the multiple choice questions, and hopefully they can use what they highlight to answer the multiple choice questions. And of course, remind them that eliminating the wrong answers is a good place to start. Another thing to do in class, I've called it what's wrong, I don't know what. So students work in pairs. You ask each pair to have 4 highlighters or 4 different pens. This time what they're going to do is go through the text and, start with the questions, and they're going to highlight the keywords in each of the 4 questions in a different colour. Then they go to the corresponding paragraph, and anything they find that connects to those 4 questions, they're going to highlight in the colour corresponding with that option. The idea of this is that students will become more familiar with the way Cambridge tries to trap them or confuse them. I think once they understand that process, hopefully they'll start to avoid those traps. So this is something you could definitely do in class. What I'd probably do with, if you guys have teenagers, is maybe give them like 2 questions for each pair, rather than asking them to do the full text, because as we know, they get bored really quickly. Okay, So is anyone else, so that's kind of the bit for part 5, unless anyone else has other ideas that they want to add. Sorry. Does anybody else have some ideas that they use in class that they'd like to say? No? Okay. So we'll have a look at the reading part 6. And so the FCE reading part 6 and the CAE reading part 7. So just to remind you, again, this one is a text with 6 sentences or paragraphs that have been removed. And the students basically have to complete the text, but they have 7 sentences or paragraphs to choose from. So this is testing the students' ability to understand the structure, text structure, and development. So I would recommend, and from what I've read online, they recommend spending a little bit more time on this task. I think it's more complicated. I think you guys will probably know it is definitely more difficult than part 5. So encourage the students to spend a bit more time on this part of the exam. So here's an example. I know that you've all seen it before, seen one before. So as always, with the strategy in general, we start with the prediction. We've already talked about this, so you know. And then they're going to skim it. But what I recommend, because as I just said, this part of the exam is about text development and the way the text is formed. It's really important that they understand this. So I recommend that in this task, they don't skim read it in 1 minute. I think they need to take more time, because what I want them to do is skim read it, but also while they're skim reading, be paying attention to the clues that are going to help them to find the answers to this task, okay? So if they want, and what I would recommend is when they're skim reading to, with a highlighter, just highlight any of those clues. So the clues would include linking words, pronouns, and time expressions, determiners. We can have a look at those after. So take the skimming a little bit more slowly, a little bit more seriously, I guess, because it's going to help a lot with this task. And then there's this kind of you decide, choose your own story thing where I've read different strategies. So some of the strategies recommend that the students only read the text, and some of them recommend that while they're skimming, they read the text and the options. Okay, doing the same thing with the highlighters. So I would recommend trying both things. I think whenever you have strategies, try as many as you can and let the students decide what works for them, okay? So once they've skim read it, they're going to go back to the beginning again, and they're going to read more slowly. They're going to read from the beginning up to the first gap, and this is really important, and the sentence immediately after the gap. And if they didn't do it before, they're going to highlight any connectors, pronouns, and time expressions. So things to consider as well: the macro structure, like the logical beginning, middle, and end of the text, any grammatical links, and any lexical links. So what I do next with my CAE class is, so once we've read up to the first gap and the sentence immediately after that gap, again, this is a strategy based on speed, okay? I want to emphasize that. This is a strategy based on helping them do the exam quickly. So what we do is we read the first line of each of the options. And doing that, you can really quickly split the options into a maybe or a no. So usually the key things that help you with this, and this will hopefully be things that they've highlighted, are things like this approach will be in the first line of the options. And if they haven't mentioned an approach before, if there's a mention of something and they don't know what it is, they can eliminate it. Or if the topic is totally different, they can eliminate it. So we go through and we split them into maybe or no. So for those maybes, I would then encourage my students to read the full paragraph, paying special attention to connectors, pronouns, and time expressions. So, can they find the right answer from their maybes? If they can, amazing, wonderful. They can move on to the second question. So they would continue with the same approach. So they would read from the end of the first gap to the second gap and the line immediately after, and use the same approach. If they have two maybes or three maybes or four maybes, I think something that I learned that has been really helpful for my students is that you shouldn't insist that your students do this part of the test in order. Some of these questions are more difficult, and some of them are really easy, or some of them are easier and more obvious. So what I think is really helpful is if they do the easier ones first, because then they're taking away options. And then when they come to do the more difficult ones, they'll have less options. And therefore it should be easier for them to do it. What I generally do is we do the first couple of questions together. It's a bit uncomfortable, but I read the text out. So we're all really paying attention to what's going on, and we're doing it as a collective. And I think if you try this approach with reading the first lines, you'll be really surprised how easy and effective it is. It really, really works. And then assuming, and I don't know how, because it is really tricky, but assuming that they have time in the end, obviously what they would ideally do is read the full text with the paragraphs they've put in to check that it makes sense. But that is a lot to do in less than 20 minutes. So that's the technique I like to use. Again, some things I found online that I think are important to bear in mind, things to consider. A good key fits one lock. The key to the task is to know that each gap is in the text can only be filled by one of the paragraphs. So there will be enough information, but you have to become a detective to find the clues. This is something actually the students need to be good at for the use of English as well. So this becoming a detective is something that's useful throughout the exam. Things to think about as well, names and pronouns are a big part, or if they introduce, I don't know, a person that's commenting on the topic and then you can see quotation marks. Chronology, time expressions are important. Quotation marks, as I said, contrast words, hence, cause and effect, repetition, and clues. So, again, I'm going to send you all of this. Okay. So, things to do in class to hopefully, so you're not just doing the same technique and it's not boring. So a few suggestions for things you can do in class to hopefully make this a little bit more interesting. So first, you would always start with the prediction task. And then what I think is nice, if you split your students into pairs, one person is going to skim read and look for connectors and time expressions, and the other person is going to skim and look for pronouns and determiners. they can then come together and share their information and work together to complete the task. I think this kind of communicative approach is a really nice way of doing it. It's more interesting. I think you need to keep them engaged, and so I think this is a nice way to do it. Another thing that I thought about you could try is, obviously we have a lot of kinesthetic learners, so a nice way to do it for them would be to cut it up. So you could cut up the task into the sections, cut up the paragraphs, and they would be completing it as normal, but it's going to be something more physical. So it's not just staring at a piece of paper. I think a lot of people, myself included, are kinesthetic learners, and so we like to do things. So I think that is a really great approach, particularly probably for younger learners. Another collaborative approach you could try, I haven't tried this one, is to split the students in pairs again. So they're going to predict and skim read as normal, but then what you're going to do, one person is going to take the text and one person is going to take the options, okay, the paragraphs, and they're going to go through with their highlighters and look for those clues. And then they're going to work together to complete it. So for example, the first one, the person who read the text could be like, okay, so in my first gap, before the gap, they were talking about this, and after they were talking about this. And hopefully they can do it as kind of a collaborative approach, which would make it more enjoyable, more fun, and less laborious, I hope. Other few things to think about. So students need an hour for the CAE reading or 45 minutes for the FCE. So 30 minutes for the use of English, and the rest of the time for the CAE and the FCE. I don't know if you guys have suggested this to students, but some people say it's good to do the reading first. So the idea is that you do the reading first and then work backwards. So then do parts 4, 3, 2, and end with part 1 because it's multiple choice, so you can do it quickly. The idea is that if you do the reading first, there's going to be lots of language and vocabulary in there that might then help you with the use of English. So it could be something to suggest to your students to try in like the mock exam that they're going to be doing quite soon, I think, probably in April or March. So yeah, trying to do it, the readings first and then the use of English. Every single website about how to improve the reading tells the students that they have to read more. And that the only way to really improve is to read. So find something that they enjoy reading and read it. There's loads of, I think there's a couple at Clen, but available for ebooks and stuff. There's loads of graded readers, which are a really great way of practicing reading. If they have like an ebook, it's really useful because they can just press the word, they get a definition if they want. So it can be more enjoyable. So yeah, reading as much as you can encourage them to do it. And then for you guys, don't use the teacher's books. I know the teacher's books are wonderful and beautiful, but when your students are doing a reading task, you should also do the reading task, because then when they're having problems, if they don't understand why an answer is right or wrong, sorry, you can explain, because often the teacher's books just tell you why something is right, but they don't always tell you why something is wrong, and the students are going to need that explanation. So if you do the task with them, you'll be able to explain it to them. And then, of course, with readings, don't miss the opportunity to focus on new vocabulary. If you're not in a hurry and it's not an intensive, take that opportunity, get them to search for synonyms or antonyms or choose 3 new words, and just try and utilize the readings as much as possible. And now I've been talking for more than half an hour. Yolanda, did you have any other ideas that you wanted to share? Because I know you had some other approaches. Oh, but we can't hear you. You're on mute.
It's on silent.
Yolanda, you're on. We can't hear you.
Bro, my connection here at the moment is not very good.
Ah, okay.
You know, Miguel Angel is at the same time, checking, the main road. So sometimes I cannot even hear you.
Okay.
Alone, everything else, but they are changing some cables. So what do you say, Rose? Sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just asking if you had any more ideas or things to do in class.
Yeah, I mean, the ones I said with you, Ro, go over them. That's how I approach it. Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ah, that's good. Ro, illustrate us, some of the, how I tackle this part. For instance, one way to do it as well. Sorry, I can't hear you now.
Nobody's talking.
Ah, that's why. Sorry. No, because they're with the cables. Ro, it's incredible. Ro, whatever I said with you. Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Yes. If you want to go over, the dynamics I shared with you.
Which one? Did I miss one?
Hold on.
You guys want to send me your email addresses in the notes, in the comments, then I can email you this information and any other ideas that Yolanda adds when she's got connection. So if you want to send your email addresses in the notes. We'll stop. Thank you very much for coming. I hope there was something useful, and maybe I'll see you in person one day. Okay.